Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. The verses which have been under discussion, we had studied until verse 177, and we will now go up to 185 before we start doing the literal and idiomatic translation. In fact, it's verse 177 until which we had covered last time, and this verse was the famous verse which is called the verse of Bir, or the verse of loyalty, and it is one of the longer verses of the Quran. However, as I had pointed out earlier, that in between the directives which are now given to the newly constituted Muslim Ummah, this verse appears as a caution to Muslims, and it tells them that in spite of the Sharia they are bound to follow, they must never forget the essence and spirit of religion. And that spirit is not to get engaged and involved too much in the form and structure of something and forget or sacrifice the spirit or the soul of that body that we think that we should follow. So the essence of something is as important as the form. So the form and essence debate, which has often been a debate amongst religious people, is something which the Quran wants to have settled once and for all. We know from our past history that Jews were more oriented towards the form and structure, and they would not give due importance to the hikmah or the essence of those directives. And precisely for that reason, we know that Prophet Jesus was sent with Gospels, and these Gospels, if you have read them, which I'm sure you might have, you'll see them that they abound with that essence of religion, the spirit of religion, the hikmah, the wisdom part of religion, which is, as I said, as important as the structure. The Quran has this unique importance and distinction that it is an amalgam of both the form and structure. So form and structure, as far as the Quran is concerned, you'll find both of them going side by side. The Torah, as we know, the way it has now reached us, in fact, even in the times of Prophet Muhammad, the translations which had reached him in his era and right after him, they were translations, and of course a lot of notes and historical anecdotes were added to the original Torah, and you'll find that whatever has now reached us is more an amalgam of form and structure, and a lot of things which relate to its essence is something you'll not find there. And that is precisely why for so many years we have found that this was an important addition when the gospel was revealed. And Jesus, when he came, he said that he has not come to revoke the law. So the words that he used when he said that he has come to complete the Torah, he said that he has not come to revoke the law. And we also should note that the word Torah in the Hebrew language, it means the law or the canon. And so therefore he said that he has just come to complete it, which of course refers to the fact that whatever is missing from that element has to be furnished by him. The Quran is something which, as I said, has this thing in it, and these set of verses that we studied, or this set of verses I would say that we studied last time, the verse of Bir, which is verse 177 of Surah Baqarah, it stands out in this capacity that it points to this essence of religion. It says that لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. This is no loyalty to God that you face east or the west. I mean, it's more of the form or something that you would do at his behest. But loyalty is the loyalty of people who, then there is a whole list of things which is now enumerated. So once that verse ended, and this was what we covered in our last session, we now have once again a series of directives which is given in the form of the Sharia. And we do remember that this section of Surah Baqarah that we are now studying is a section in which all these directives are revived. They were part of the original Abrahamic religion, but they had been either consigned to oblivion, or they had been distorted or forgotten. So they have been revived. Once the new Ummah was constituted, we know that this is something which was essential, that these directives would be given afresh to them. So just before this verse, we had directives which of course related to the Sharia, and now once again, as you can see from the screen that is now being displayed before you, we are now faced with the directive of qisas, which means the what should be done if there is a murder committed, and what exactly should be the punishment of murder. So these are verses of qisas, and we'll see that these verses, once they end, we'll find verses which relate to wills and testaments, that especially the inheritance part, in which, of course, the purpose was that before a whole law was revealed, people were first prepared that they should once again come back to this very important area of their own lives in which they must make a will. And then right after that, we find the directives which relate to Sawm, or the fast, which are being mentioned, and this will continue, and we'll find other directives following these. So basically, this is a section in which the Sharia is once again revived, and as I said, in between this revival, it is this caution that is being sounded to us that one must not sacrifice the spirit or the essence of the form of the Sharia that has been given. So let's start off with this verse that we will begin. We'll begin with verse 178. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم القصاص في القتلى الحر بالحر والعبد بالعبد والأنثى بالأنثى فمن أعفي له من أخيه شيء فاتباع بالمعروف وأداء إليه بإحسان ذلك تخفيف من ربكم ورحمة فمن اعتدى بعد ذلك فله عذاب أليم ولكم في القصاص حياة يا أولي الألباب لعلكم تتقون. Believers, qisas is decreed for you in the case of those among you who are killed, such that if the murderer is a free man, then the same free man should be killed in his place. And if he is a slave, then the same slave should be killed in his place. And if the murderer is a woman, then the same woman should be killed in her place. Then, for whom there has been some concession from his brother, you can accept it. But if it is accepted, then after this it should be followed according to the custom, and whatever is the diyat should be paid to him accordingly, and paid to him befittingly. This is a kind of concession from your Lord and his favor upon you. Then after this, for whoever exceeds the limits is a torment afflicted on the day of judgment. And there is life for you in qisas, O men of insight, so that you may keep following the limits set by God. So here you can see, dear viewers, the whole directive of qisas is laid out in its full glory. We find some of the other aspects, of course, also in some of the other surahs of the Quran. But primarily you'll find that here the Quran has given a very, very revolutionary proposal to end centuries-old enmities that, the Arab society was based on this whole concept of revenge. And this revenge and vengeance would take extremes, and it would continue for years and years, and even for centuries, and tribes and so many families would be wiped off as a result of this vengeance. And not just the murderer, the person that would be murdered, the revenge and the vengeance that would be taken would be that in lieu of the murdered person, not just the murderer would be killed, but the whole society, or maybe part of the family of that murderer would be also put to death. And this would incense and stoke the fire of revenge even further, and this would continue from one side, and then of course the retaliation would continue from the other side. But here the Quran has given this very revolutionary concept, and it says that although it is mandatory upon you to take qisas, which means that if there is some murder in the society, then it has to be avenged with murder of that particular person. So the first reformation that it made was that while taking that retaliation, while benefiting from this retaliation, no more than what the murderer did should be done. And instead of killing other people for just one killing and adding more deaths to it, the only person who should be killed is the killer himself, whether he's a woman, whether he's a man, whether he or she is a slave person. All of them, the person who is the perpetrator of the crime should be put to death, no one else. And as we know that this was the Arab custom in those times, which I just said earlier on, that they would not content themselves with killing the killer. They would go on and even murder his wife or his children or people who would be related to him. So the Quran, first of all, made this thing very clear to them that you must not exceed limits. So if a harm has been inflicted, yes, you can inflict the same harm and no more than that. But then it gave another revolutionary concept, which was even more revolutionary than the first one. And it said, فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ شَيْءٌ فَاتِّبَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. But if the murdered person's heirs, they would like to in any way show concession and mercy by forgiving that person. So it says, فَمَنْ عُفِيَ لَهُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ شَيْءٌ فَاتِّبَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Then this concession can be benefited from, and instead of exacting the life of the murderer, if they settle on diyat, which means that there is a penalty on them. Diyat is a word which is not, it's not used here, but you will find it being used in other instances. But the expression ada'un ilayhi bi ihsan actually alludes to it, that in lieu of life, if you settle for a penalty on the murderer's family, then that can also be accepted. But one word of caution here has to be understood, and that is because the fact that the parties which can be enumerated as far as the murder is concerned is the society, which is, of course, there is concentrated in the government. It is the family of the heirs of the person who was murdered, and the murderer himself, the person who was responsible of that killing. So these are the three people who are involved in this whole tripartite, I would say. These are the three parties that are involved. So if you look at the words of the Quran, you'll see that it is equally important that if this forgiveness is to be followed from the heirs of the murdered person, then this cannot go on unless the state is also in agreement with the fact that yes, the murdered person or the murderer can be forgiven. So in other words, because qisas is mandatory on the society, which is the very first words of this verse, it tells us that the importance of the society's intervention in this act also. So in other words, what is implied here is it's not just the family of the heirs or the family of the murdered person who has the prerogative or the authority to forgive. Yes, they have this authority to do so, but this will only be implemented if the state authorities also agree that yes, this lenience can be shown. However, if the state authorities think that this lenience would cause further nuisance, or the person is not worthy of being forgiven because of the nature of his crimes, or if he is let loose, he will do that again, then this will not be done. So it is important to note here that the forgiveness element by the family of the murdered person can only be implemented if the state authorities also agree. So this is an important note. And then the third thing that has to be also gauged from these verses is that the Quran says, ذَلِكَ تَخْفِيفٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ, that this is the concession, which means that you cannot totally forgive the murderer and not even take diyat from him. So when the Quran says that yes, that diyat can be exacted, and it immediately follows this up by saying, ذَلِكَ تَخْفِيفٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ, that this is the furthermost concession that can be given. You just cannot forgive the murderer, not only, his life, you propose the fact that yes, his life will not be taken, and you say that diyat shall also not be taken. So this second option is not there for you. Diyat must be exacted, that penalty must be imposed. Yes, you can forgive the life of that person, forgive the murderer, but then only, as I said, that if the state authorities are also in agreement. Otherwise, of course, this would not work. So, فَمَنْ يَرْتَدَى بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ فَلَهُ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. The Quran says that if anyone moves beyond this, who exceeds the limits, then فَلَهُ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, then for him is a very, very grave torment. So these are the limits which the Almighty has stipulated, that no one should kill anyone but the murderer. And that the fact that this is also anything that you must not exceed in any way. If you do so, then remember on the Day of Judgment, God is going to be there as the person who is going to exact that revenge in a very, very stern way. And the last verse, which is very important, which is وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that in the taking of this qisas is the life for the society, O men of insight. Which means actually that qisas, which of course means to exact revenge for murder, if you do so, the Quran says that in it rests the life of a society, because if you let a person go scot-free without any charges against him, then you will actually give license to more people to kill and continue to kill, because there would be no inhibition left in them. So the Quran says that yes, you can forgive, but this forgiveness will only be effective when both the state authorities and the family of the murdered person agreed to forgive that person. And anyone who exceeds these limits is going to be faced with an afflictive torment. And people must realize that if they just forget this qisas directive, then they will consign their society to more killing and carnage, because this qisas or this retaliation in the case of murder is something which checks this flow of inhuman expression of killing other people. So that is why it is said, وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِصَاصِ حَيَاةٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. O men of insight, O men of understanding, there is life in death. In other words, such a beautiful contrast that you're taking the life of a person, you're making a person die. And look what the Quran is saying, that there is life in this death, which means that it will guarantee the life of other people. Otherwise, if you start asking human beings, so you'll find that the element of compassion and mercy is, of course, found in so many people. It might have gone to this extreme as to not take any revenge from people. And this is precisely what has happened, dear viewers. If you look at our countries which surround us, and especially the Western countries, you'll find that the capital punishment is no longer implemented in most countries. In extreme cases, it is implemented. And precisely for this reason, look at the amount of killings and gun killings that go on unchecked in most countries, the US included. Of course, there are gun license laws which are very, very, which can be easily flouted, because you can have conveniently a gun at your disposal. But at the same time, this killing in which, because of the fact that you are not going to be killed in return for killing a person, you'll be consigned to prison. You might serve a very long sentence in prison, but your life would not be taken. That has increased the number of killings as well, because you know that you can get away with murder. So the Quran, on the other hand, says that there is life in this death. There is life in this vengeance. If you just write off this, then it will not be correct. Of course, in the case of forgiveness from the heirs and from the state authorities, that's an exception. But otherwise, if a person is really guilty, he deserves no lenience, then in all cases, qisas has to be exacted. Now we move on to the, before we move on to the next portion, which is a new directive in the form of wasiya, if you have any questions regarding what we have just studied in these two verses, please raise them.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, इसमें यहाँ जो आपने बताया कि अगर स्टेट मतलब ये कि दियत के लिए अगर कातिल ऐसे लोग हैं जो बासर हैं और स्टेट उनको फिर भी सजा देना चाहती है, तो उसमें क्या होता है कि वो दियत नहीं ले सकते, यानी जो मकतूल के घर वाले हैं उनको दियत भी नहीं दी जाती है और स्टेट की तरफ से सजा दी जाती है। ये बात समझ नहीं आई मुझे।
What I'm saying is that if any concession is to be given, which means that you have to forgive the murderer, and you're just going to settle for diyat, then this can only be done if state authorities also agree that yes, you can forgive the person. I mean, what does that mean? That you would not exact retaliation in the form of the murderer being killed as revenge. You'll settle for diyat. If this is something which the heirs of the murdered person agree to, then this shall only go ahead if the state authorities also agree. Let me give you an example why I'm stressing this and why this verse actually speaks of this very, very vehemently. You see, in the case of honor killings, it happens, and this is an erroneous implementation of the law of qisas and diyat in Pakistan, in which, if, for example, if a father kills his daughter for honor, then the heirs of that daughter, of course, are the mother and the other siblings. So they end up forgiving the father. And in our law here, if you end up forgiving the father for the murder of his daughter, because the heirs of that murdered daughter they agreed that we'll forgive the father, then he will just go scot-free. Whereas it could be the case that in such situations, you are just trying to protect your own family member, and he's a real criminal. So in this case, the government can interfere and say that, well, we are not going to accept this forgiveness on your part. And forgiveness, by forgiveness, of course, we mean that they will settle for diyat. So this settlement for diyat, that they will not exact revenge, but they will take diyat, will only take place if the murderous person's family is, of course, agreeing to forgive, and the government is also in line with the fact that, yes, this person that they are now trying to forgive, he deserves their forgiveness. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Otherwise, if a person is for example, has committed, let's see, honor killing. So honor killing is something that cannot be justified in any case. And it happens in countries like Pakistan that people who are guilty of honor killings, they go free. Because you see, once they kill their daughter or their sister or anyone, the rest of the heirs, they forgive that person already, because they think that they justify the killing of the daughter. So this is just an example to tell you that how at times this wrong understanding of the law can take its toll. So generally, the law which is implemented in many Muslim countries, including Pakistan, is that the government will not interfere. It will be a case between the murdered person and the murderer. If the murdered person's heirs forgive the murderer, then that will be sufficient. They don't accept the interference of the government. But this verse, the way it has been presented here, it says that state authorities are bound to take this qisas. Kutiba alaykumul qisasu fil qatla. It already actually empowers the government that, well, if it insists on revenge in the form of qisas, then that shall go ahead. So in other words, this is only lifted when both the state authorities and the murdered person's family agree. So I hope this is clear now.
जी इस मिसाल से अब बेहतर समझ आया, शुक्रिया बहुत.
So next move on to verses 180 to 182. Now these verses mention the issue of inheritance. So we know that the detailed law of inheritance has been given in Surah Nisa, which is the 4th surah, and inshallah we'll be studying it at its own time. But before that law was given, one thing that was revived in the Arab society was that people should be encouraged to make wills in favor of their own heirs. So no shares were stipulated for those heirs, as was done later on in the case of Surah Nisa. But initially, people were, in order to make them use to the fact that they should make a will of the wealth that they are leaving behind in favor of their heirs, which include, of course, their siblings. They could include their children, their spouse, and their parents. So for this, the directive that was given was that you should follow the conventions of the society, bil-ma'ruf, and whatever amount seems okay to you to bequeath in favor of these heirs, you can do so. So the amount of that share has not been specified initially. Those specifications have been mentioned later on in Surah Nisa when that law was revealed. But before that law was revealed, a general law was given to the Muslims or to the believers that before the Almighty Himself specifies the shares of the heirs, you have the discretion of giving however much you'd like to your heirs. So there was no amount specified earlier on, and people were given this prerogative or this jurisdiction or authority that they could give to their heirs as much as they would like to. The only restriction was that it should be bil ma'ruf, which means it should be according to the conventions of the society. So let us read this verse and some of the things that are related to it. Kutiba alaykum iza hadara ahadakumul maut in taraka khayra al-wasiyya lil-walidain wal-aqrabin bil-ma'ruf. This is the important term, bil-ma'ruf. Haqqan alal-muttaqin. So similarly, in order to protect you from financial disputes, so this important suppression which has been revealed by Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi in the text of his translation is actually referring to the fact that earlier on you were protected from your life. So anything that would temper your life and anything that endanger your life, of course, would be tampering with your life to the extent that you would go and murder people. So a law was given to protect your life. Now there is another law being given which is going to protect your wealth. So that is why Ustaz has actually used this word similarly. So just as earlier on protection or a law for the protection of human life was revealed, now you find another law for the protection of the financial aspects of a person. So it is said, it is made mandatory upon you that whenever death approaches any one of you and he is leaving behind some wealth. Now, one thing that I'd like to point out here is a translation of the word khaira. The word khaira has been translated as wealth. And this is a very apt use, which actually is a very big blow to a lot of mystics or the mystic religions which prevailed in the times of Prophet. And that is that wealth was considered to be an evil. Money was considered to be an evil. Currency, or in those times we don't have currency, things were used in kind. So whatever wealth or property a person would have would be regarded as something which would contaminate your purification of your soul, and therefore people were encouraged to just let go of them, especially the mystics in the times of Prophet and other areas. So mysticism is something which makes you realize that, well, owning wealth and property is a very secondary notion, and it's not that important. But you see what happens here is that khair has been used to exactly dispel this notion that wealth is nothing which is of secondary importance or something which is an evil. The word which is used for wealth and property in Arabic is khair. Khair is something which is good. So in other words, the Quran first of all wants to dispel this notion that wealth or property should be regarded as a contamination or as something which is going to lure away a person from the higher objectives of life. What it is being said is that in fact this wealth is a khair. It is a good which is being revealed to you, which has been given to you. Why is it a good? Because of course that wealth can be used not only for your own purposes but for the people around you who deserve that wealth. So this important thing you must note, that as students of the Quran, that the word khair has been used for wealth and property, and this use is not just confined here. You'll find this usage in other verses of the Quran as well. So it says that in taraka khairan al-wasiyya lil walidaini wal aqrabina bil ma'ruf, that it is made mandatory upon you that whenever death approaches any one of you and he is leaving behind some wealth, then he should make a will for his parents and near relatives according to the custom, according to the ma'ruf, according to the convention. So it has also pointed out here that the heirs, which include your parents, include your relatives, you should write a will in the favor. You should document your will in this favor. So you have to accept this fact that as far as this will is concerned, it has to be according to the ma'ruf. It should not be something which is governed by your fancy. It should not be against the norms of justice. The Quran has specified this, that it has to be according to the good conventions of the society, something which is affable, something which is amiable, something which is really close to our heart. And then there is a caution in the next two verses, and that is فَمَنْ بَدَّلَهُ بَعْدَمَا سَمِعَهُ فَإِنَّمَا إِثْمُهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يُبَدِّلُونَهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. So it says, then he who alters this will after hearing it, then its sin is only upon those who alter it. They should keep in mind that surely God hears all and knows all. So anyone who alters the will, فَمَنْ بَدَّلَهُ بَعْدَمَا سَمِعَهُ, once he has heard that will, and because that person is going to pass away. So if you have heard his will, if that has not been documented, and you, for example, are a witness to those words which make that will, and you start changing that will, I mean you change it at will. The Quran says that this is something which can happen because it's not always easy to document your things in those times. So you would rely on what the witnesses would have heard. So if you distort that, if you change that, the Quran says that this is something which is not acceptable, and it would be something which is a huge sin. فَإِنَّمَا إِسْمُهُ عَلَى الَّذِينَ يُبَدِّلُونَهُ, and God hears and knows all. And then it says, فَمَنْ خَافَ مِن مُوسٍ جَنَفًا أَوْ إِسْمًا فَأَصْلَحَ بَيْنَهُمْ فَلَا إِسْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. However, he who fears partiality or injustice on the part of a bequeather, so bequeather is the person who makes a will, and brings about a settlement among the parties, then he incurs no sin. Indeed, God is forgiving, ever merciful. So فَمَنْ خَافَ مِنْ مُوفٍ. So this is another caution that is being sounded here, that you cannot change the will of a person. But if there is some injustice that you find in that will, and then you bring the parties together and say, well, this is something which is not correct, and you insist upon, as a person who is a mediator, as a reformer, that you actually create this harmony between them, that the person who is willing some amount of his wealth or property and the person who is receiving that, and there are other people also who might be deprived, if they are made to sit together and they reach some conclusion, then the verse says that this would incur no sin, because if you're changing that, you're not changing it of your own accord, you're changing it with the consent of people. And this is very, very likely to have happened in those times, as I said, because not everything would be easy to document, because of there were few people who were literate, so to speak, that they would write, and this had to be testified through hearing, through one's listening ability, in which the witnesses would be there and they would present this case as they were present at the time of making that will. So, فَلَا إِسْمَ عَلَيْهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And if you do so, if you change it amongst people, so that when they are brought together, it doesn't feel that you are changing the will, all that you're doing is you are settling the affairs, then inna Allah ghafurur rahim, and God is forgiving and He's ever merciful, and there's no sin that they incur. So this was that initial law that, as I just pointed out, which was given to the Arab society, the Muslim society. Remember, this is a Medinan surah, so this was given in the time of Medina, that as far as as Muslims are concerned, they should protect their wealth. And this also gives us this very important principle, that whatever you earn, you have to pass it on to your next in kin, and that is an arrangement that you should do in time. So look what the Quran says, kutiba alaykum iza hadara ahadakumul maut, which means that when death stares any person among you in the eye. Of course, this doesn't mean that you are now about to go and you would not be even possible for you to make that will. It actually means that this is something that this is the last limit. This is the last limit after which you will have no opportunity left to make that will. So at least when you feel that your death is approaching you, you should do that. However, this does not mean that you have to leave your will until that occasion. In other words, it's the demand of wisdom. Wisdom entails that if you have to make a will, you do it well in time. And because this will is also part of the law of inheritance, which we'll study inshallah when we reach Surah Nisa. So whenever you have to write a will, then that should be done well in time, not right at the end when you're just leaving this world, because you never know when you might not even have that opportunity. So best to do it in time. But as far as making this will is concerned, how are the dictates of this will governed? We'll discuss more of it inshallah when we read Surah Nisa and the shares of inheritance. But I would like to point out this much, that making a will is still a very important obligation, which we all people, we must write down a will if we are leaving any form of wealth behind. And one will, or one form of this will, is made incumbent upon all the husbands of amongst believers, and that we'll study once we go on. We go ahead in Surah Baqarah, and that will say that every single husband must make a will in favor of his wife, that 1 year's provision and both of residence and maintenance shall be provided from his wealth. This is besides the share of inheritance that the wife is going to be given. So the will that every single Muslim husband is incumbent to write is that if he passes away, then for 1 year the residence and maintenance allowance of your wife that you would normally give when you were alive is going to continue for that 1 year, and she will not in any way be turned out of that house for any reason. Of course, if she is out of her own will, marries someone else, or has some other opportunity or option, that is another matter. Otherwise, it is incumbent upon every Muslim husband, and I make it a point to raise this point every time we study these verses, because this is a forgotten directive of Islam, and we don't remember this, that as husbands we have to write down this will, that for 1 year she will live, our wife will live in the way she was living when the husband would be alive, and she will be given the same amount of remuneration. Her maintenance allowance would be the same per month for 12 months. So which means that Muslim husbands must make this arrangement that before they pass away, that they should ensure that their wives have 1 year's provision after their death. Of course, if you can do even more, that is even better. But at least 1 year's provision for your wife is something which is incumbent in every Muslim husband, according to his own circumstances, according to his own background, according to his own earning, is bound to make this arrangement. So let's before we move on to the next set of directives, of course, which are the directives which relate to Siyam or the fast. If you have any questions regarding these 3 verses which relate to writing of wills, please raise them now.
Following up from the previous set of verses, the question that we couldn't take, it asks, does this mean Islam has a binary logic for murderers? Either kill them or forgive them. Life sentence or limited punishment is not an option in Islam for a murderer.
Right, that is correct.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Noshad Shafkat, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Right. Dr. Sab, just wanted to know that in the verses that you just read, you said that the will must be made when a person is near death, approaching death. While according to the law that we study, is that in Marzul Maut, the will becomes invalid. You cannot make a will when you are close to death and sick in a way that death is imminent. Could you clarify that, please?
So actually, this is not what I said. This is what the Quran says. It's not that you are being asked to make a will at the time of your death, or I mean, when you're sick to the extent that you would anticipate that you might die. It is before that. So the words are "Iza hadara ahadakumul maut," when a person thinks that his death is approaching, which means that he is still in his senses. He's not sick. But he knows, for example, when he might be in old age, for example, he might have some terminal illness like cancer or something of the sort. So you see, such people do know that, well, you might not have much time to live. So the Quran is saying that this is the last limit before you should at least write it down. Otherwise, the words of the Quran entail it should be written much before that. But this is the last, this is the last or the utmost limit. And as I said, it's not in the sickness that you should do it. It's like just well before that, when you are hale and hearty, you are fully functional. The Quran says that the time that you are fully functional, up till the time that you can feel that you are fully functional, is the last time before which you should do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Our next question is from Shaban Ansari. Please go ahead.
जी डॉक्टर साहब, ये जो आपने बताई है 1 साल के लिए, ये तो बिल्कुल मतलब ये कि जैसे है ही नहीं कुरान में, हम लोगों को तो मतलब माशरे का हिस्सा भी नहीं लगती है वाली आयत। और दूसरी
Right.
जो वसीयत वाली बात आपने कही है, तो वो शायद मेरा ख्याल कि फिर उसके लिए भी ये बात की जाती है कि वो तो हिस्से अल्लाह ने मुकर्रर कर दिए हैं और सिर्फ कर्जे की बात होती है और बाकी 1/3 की बात होती है।
This is also something, you're absolutely right that both these two things are forgotten, and they have eluded Muslim societies in many ways. So for first thing, I think very soon, maybe in a couple of weeks, we'll be reaching that verse which is in Surah Baqarah, which says mata'an ila al-hawl ghayra ikhraj. These words actually mean that a year's provision. Mata'an ila al-hawl. Hawl means 1 year. So for the widows, you have to prepare that provision of 1 year. Ghayra ikhraj means that you just cannot have them turned out from the house that they are living. So in any case, 1 year's provision and maintenance has to be made. So we'll just about very soon, inshallah, read that verse. And what was your second?
वही के वसीयत में जो है वो तो अल्लाह ताला।
Yes, so that inshallah we'll clarify in more detail when we study Surah Nisa. Otherwise, as far as wasiyat is concerned, wasiyat is of 3 sorts. There is wasiyat which is done on the basis of your familial relationship or your blood relationship. Only that part has been revoked because God says that now I'm taking a step ahead and letting you know that this is the amount of shares that you would like, that I would like you to give to your heirs. So in Surah Nisa, he says that on the familial will which you were making previously is now something I will make on your behalf, and whatever you give to your family is no longer a prerogative of your own. I am now going to tell you that this is how you should distribute your wealth. So this is just one part of the will, or one form of the will. Wills are made on other bases as well. For example, if some heir has done some outstanding service to you, he or she might, let's suppose that there is a daughter who did not marry because she thought that either parent was sick and she wanted to devote her life to their cause. Or for example, there could be this element that one of the children, they could not prosper in life. They were mentally challenged, or they somehow could not settle themselves. So a will which is made on the basis of a familiar relationship, that has been revoked, and on that basis God says, I have stepped in and have told you that on the basis of your family, your familiar relationship with them, your blood ties with them, I will tell you that wasiyah, and that is the law of inheritance. But there are two other bases of making a will, and as I said, one of them is service and the other is need. So on the basis of service and need, you can make a will in favor of the heirs as well. So if, for example, as I said, a daughter has done something far more than a son in serving serving the parent, then the parent, on account of that, can will more money even than the son actually. And this is the same in the case of the wife as well. So that is something which has to be understood, that as far as making a will is concerned, this will has to be implemented even before the law of inheritance comes into play. And you'll see when you study Surah Nisa that the words used are min ba'di wasiyatin yusi biha aw dayn, that this will be implemented, this law of inheritance will be implemented ba'd al-wasiyah, once that will which you had made, which should not be on the basis of family, because for that the law of inheritance has already been given, which could be on the basis of some need or some service that the person has performed for you. But of course, there could be other areas of the will as well. For example, you would like to give to some charity organization. So that wasiyah can also be made, which of course does not relate to the heirs. You can give to non-heirs as well. So wasiyah is of two types. One is in the favor of heirs. That can not be given unless that heir has performed some service or need. And wasiyah can be for non-heirs. For that there is no limit. For the former also there is no limit, but for the latter also there is no limit. So if you would like to give all your wealth to some charity organization, if you would like to gift your wealth, or to let your wealth be inherited by some non-heir, that is also possible. The only restriction on that is that you should not be doing something which is unjust for people, and you are trying to deprive someone of that money that might have been useful for an heir. So that the reason that caution is to be made is that wasiyah must be implemented before the law of inheritance. So whatever wasiyah you have made shall be implemented before that. And if you have, for example, willed all your money to a charity organization or to a non-heir, and there is nothing left for the heirs, then they'll receive nothing. But if you have done this on purpose so that you'd like to deprive a very rightful heir of the money that should have gone to him, and instead of that you have now written a will in the favor of a non-heir and willed all your money, given that money in wasiyah to a non-heir, then it is here that the Almighty says that you will be held accountable, but not in this world, in the hereafter.
1/3 की कोई restriction नहीं है.
And there is absolutely no restriction on 1/3, and we will discuss that in detail as well, that this issue of 1/3 has arisen because of a very specific situation that arose in the case of a Sahabi, in the case of a companion of the Prophet. He was actually trying to gift, to will all his wealth in charity, and the Prophet was actually stopping him. He said that you have children, so please reduce the amount that you would like to give in charity, or to make a will in form of wasiyah for some charity. So that person actually started to question the Prophet, and ultimately matters reached that he said, well, can I give it 1/3? The Prophet said, okay, it's fine, you can give 1/3 of your charity, your wealth to charity. So you see, it was a very personal occasion in which a Sahabi came to the Prophet to ask for his own situation. And as has been the case with several other instances, that our jurists, they pick up a law from a hadith without often taking into account the background. So such ahadith must be understood that they are situational. They relate to a person's situation. In the case of that Sahabi who had a lot of children, the Prophet was actually advising him that you should be depriving your heirs. And he I mean, he was like a conversation which said that, well, I would give my full wealth, and he said no, 2/3. He said no, even reduce that. He said half. He said even that is more. Ultimately, he said 1/3. The Prophet said, yeah, this seems fine. So you see, you even see from the conversation itself that the Prophet was telling that person in his own personal capacity that according to your situation, if you do it 1/3, it seems fine. So this particular narrative cannot be made a basis of law, and hence there is no restriction in our understanding as far as writing of wasiya is concerned.
और एक और भी रिवायत को बताया जाता है जिसमें वो कहते हैं कि सहाबी के वो किसी को ज्यादा दे देते हैं और बाकियों को कम देते हैं, तो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा कि मैं किसी ऐसे उस पर गवाह नहीं बनना चाहता या मैं उसका साथ नहीं दूंगा ऐसी किसी चीज का.
Well, I'm not very aware of that narrative. If you have read it, please send it to me. I'll take a look at it. I have not read that to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, ठीक है, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Bisma Tirmizi Ahmed, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. So my question to you is, the way God has told us to divide the wealth in a familial, the hierarchy or whatever, son, daughter. If the children choose to just let the wealth sit and not divide it, is there a religious limitation, restriction of how many years, or what's the responsibility? Is it just, will God punish you for it? Because of course, after one generation, there's another generation waiting to inherit it, and then how does that go?
I mean, if you're talking about the fact that the distribution of inheritance should take place right after the person's demise, then yes, this is what God wants, unless, of course, all the heirs are willing to delay for some expedient reason. Otherwise, I mean, distribution of wealth right after the inheritance, it could be the fact that just one heir is in need and the rest of them are not. So that is sufficient to have the wealth distributed. However, if all of them agree that, well, they can wait for certain reasons or there could be certain situations, then that is okay. Other than that, the Almighty wants that wealth to flow from that deceased person to his family in the way that He has prescribed, and we will study that when we go for Surah Nisa. Okay, so now let's move on to the third segment or the third string of directives which is discussed, and this is the directive of fasting. So we discussed the directive of qisas, we discussed the directive of will testaments, and now this is the third directive which is being given here. So remember, we were just talking about the fact there is a series of directives which we'll now study, and in between those directives was that directive in which we were told that you must never sacrifice the spirit and essence of religion while following its form. So it says that Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam kama kutiba alal lazina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun ayyamun ma'dudat faman kana minkum maridan aw ala safarin fa'iddatum min ayyamin ukhar wa alal lazina yutiqunahu fidyatun ta'amu miskin faman tatawwa'a khayran fahuwa khayrul lah wa an tasumu khayrul lakum in kuntum ta'lamun. So these are the limits set by God, and only they cannot cross them who fear Him. Therefore, believers, the fast has been made obligatory upon you. It has been made mandatory upon you as it was made obligatory upon those before you, so that you become fearful of God. These are but a few days. Yet if anyone among you is ill or on a journey, let him complete this count in other days. And those who have the capacity to feed a needy, they must feed a needy in place of every fast. Then he who does a virtuous deed out of his own, it is better for him. And if you fast, then this is even better for you if you have understanding. So you see, first thing that you can note here is that as far as fasting is concerned, it is not something which is a new directive. The Quran says that this is a directive which the previous nations, they also knew. So, kama kutiba alal lazina min qablikum, which says that this is made mandatory upon you the way it was made mandatory upon the previous nations, which also gives us this all-important view that as far as these rituals are concerned, these worship rituals are concerned, they did not begin with Prophet Muhammad. They began much earlier. In fact, we know that some of them were pre-Abrahamic, and Of course, Hajj was something which was started off by Prophet Abraham because he built the Kaaba, and once the Kaaba was there, then Hajj, the pilgrimage, and the Umrah, they were set in motion and they were set as directives. Otherwise, as far as the Quran is concerned, it is absolutely clear that these rituals, they were never given in the times of Prophet Muhammad. And not just the fast. If you study the Quran, you'll find regarding the prayer as well, that it was something which Prophet Abraham, when he was settling his progeny in the barren land of Mecca, had he had prescribed for his progeny, Rabbana liyuqimus salah. He said that I have built this so that they could offer the prayer. And even before Prophet Abraham, we know that other prophets also they offered the prayer. So as far as zakah is concerned, the prayer is concerned, these worship rituals, they existed. They in fact predated the Quran. So they were found even before the Quran was revealed. And this verse of Surah Baqarah is ample testimony to the fact that the fast was also something which already existed. So it says ayyamun ma'dudat. These are but a few days. Of course, referring to the fact that if you compare them, these are 30 days, and if you compare them with respect to the 365 days, they are just a paltry number of days. They are just a very small number of days. So whoever is present, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. So whoever are present but they are not able to fast because of some sickness or because of some journey, then they can, what is said, you can عِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, you can fast some other days, in some other day. However, if you have the capacity to feed the poor people, then instead of fasting some other day, you can also benefit from this, that you can make someone, or break the fast of someone, you can provide someone with the fasting opportunity. If you make someone keep the fast, then this would be counted as your own fast. But remember, this was only for people who were sick or they were unable to fast because of either sickness or being on a journey, and they were told that they could either keep it later on, or if they had the capacity to feed a needy, then they could, in lieu of not fasting later on, they could just not keep the fast and let someone have the fast. You could have someone keep the fast. So this was a concession given, and the Quran says that فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ خَيْرًا فَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ, that if someone wants to do even more than that, then that is even better. And وَأَنْ تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ, it says that the best is that you fast. So, however, if you're not able to fast, then because of a journey, remember, this is not saying that you are not able to fast just for your own reason, for any reason that comes to your mind. What it is saying is that because of journeys, because of sickness, if you're not able to fast, then either you fast in some alternative day, or you fast or you feed a needy in lieu of the fast that you are missing. So this was an initial concession that was given, and later on, as we are going to see in the next verses, this was withdrawn, because initially people were they were acclimatized, so to speak, to the ritual of fasting. They were made to fast by actually telling them that it is best for you to fast, but of course if you are sick and on a journey, you can defer your fast to be kept on some other day, or if you another concession that was given to you was that you could not fast at all, and in lieu of the sickness and journey that was making you incapacitated, you could just feed a person who was needy and make him keep a fast, or of course just give him in charity whatever he needed at that time for his fasting. So this was the initial directive, and later on, as we can see from the next verse, this directive was withdrawn. It says, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان, which means that it is the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed as a book replete with guidance, and for mankind in the form of extremely manifest arguments, which by their nature are guidance and are also a means of distinguishing a right from wrong. So this is the first thing which is mentioned. So it says, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Therefore, whoever among you is present in this month, he should observe its fasts. And he who is ill or is on a journey should complete this count in other steps. So remember, this verse has been repeated. وَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا, or وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا was a verse which existed earlier on also. So earlier on, the option was that if you were sick or you were traveling, then you could either defer your fast or feed someone in lieu of that. Now, this feeding in lieu of not fasting has now been withdrawn, and it is now said that whoever is present must fast, and therefore the reason for this is that yuridullahu bikumul yusra wala yuridu bikumul usr. So let me just translate it first. And this concession has been given because God desires ease for you and does not want to be harsh with you. And the permission given to travelers and the sick to feed the needy has been withdrawn so that you can complete the number of fasts. So the words of the Quran are وَلِتُكْمِنُوا الْعِدَّةَ. So that you can complete the count. وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. And thus not be deprived of the blessings of fasting. And for this purpose, the month of Ramadan has been fixed, so that in the form of the Quran, the guidance God has bestowed to you, you glorify God, and so that you are grateful to Him. So in other words, the implication is that this is the minimum atonement of not fasting, which people who have the capacity should offer. So if a person feeds more than one needy, this is absolutely fine. But as I said, that this permission was initially given to the believers, and later it is withdrawn, which means that now if a person is sick or on a journey, he has to make up for those fasts, come what may. He has to make up for the missed fasts. So he must keep those fasts, unless of course he is incapacitated to the extent that doctors tell him or they prescribe that he can never fast, in which case of course he can then feed a needy person in lieu of that. But the permission of feeding a needy person in lieu of not fasting because of your journey or sickness has been withdrawn. So that journey and that sickness, now the fasts which are missed as a result of that journey or sickness, they have to be kept in later periods of time as well. Also important here is to realize that the Quran has mentioned two very blatant or very prominent barriers towards fasting, or two things which can be obstructing fasting, and one of them is sickness and the other one is traveling. But today, or even in those times, there could be other areas as well. There could be other pretexts as well, which could be equally difficult scenarios to keep the fast. For example, just to give you an example, extreme heat, this could be one area, or this could be one possibility, especially for people who are working outside. For example, the laborers who are maybe building a house and they have to do all that menial work for 8 or 9 hours, and in the heat of the sun, especially when the sun is in its full glory, it's producing a lot of heat, and the temperatures are way above human capacity to tolerate them. So in such a cases, for example, if a laborer does not fast, or he defers his fast to some other period of the year, then that would also be fine. Because you see, the Quran is not confining itself that it should only be because of illness or travel that fasts can be deferred. It is actually pointing out two very common reasons that occurred in those times, and which could be very, very legitimate reasons for not fasting. But as I said, this is something that we now see can be extended on the basis of ijtihad to other things that might obstruct fasting. And another thing that might come to your mind and to my mind, of course, this is something which is always a question, and whenever the month of Ramadan starts, and that is when a person living in countries where the daylight time is a lot. For example, you have 18 hours of daylight or 19 hours of daylight, which means that your fast is going to be as long as 20 hours maybe, and in some cases it goes to 21 hours. And if you go to the poles, you'll find that there is a 24-hour day. So it is virtually impossible to fast for 24 hours or 22 hours maybe, and then start the next fast right after. So this again would be reason enough for a person to shorten the fast, or to defer it if it is possible to some other time of the year, and take any such step. So the thing that is important to note here is that the Quran has mentioned the journey and the ailment as two readily faced prospects in those times or those scenarios. Any other scenario which is similar which would also hold the same opinion. The second thing that we must also note from these verses is that the Quran has now explicitly said that Shahru Ramadan allazi unzila fihi al-Quran, that it is the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. It is the month of Ramadan. So now we are clearly in light, because the Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan. Now what does this mean? That was the whole Quran revealed in the month of Ramadan? Of course not. So there is this style in the Quran in which every verb, or at times these verbs, when they are being used, they are used in their initial meaning, or at times they are used as an intention, or at times they are used as in their complete meaning. So here actually they are used in this verb is used in its initial meaning. So we know that from another surah of the Quran, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, that the Quran was revealed in the Laylatul Qadr, which is the night of destiny. So again here, this doesn't mean that the whole of the Quran was revealed in the Laylatul Qadr. It only means that it began its revelation in this night. So Shahru Ramadan allazi unzila fihi al-Quran doesn't mean that the whole of the Quran was revealed in the month of Ramadan. Of course, this is virtually impossible. We know it was revealed in a period of 22 years. So all that it means is that this is the month in which the revelation of the Quran began. The Prophet started to receive its revelation in the month of Ramadan, and that is precisely why it seems that fasting has been made mandatory in the month of Ramadan, because this is how we express our gratitude to God for giving us this gift of the Quran. So fasting is basically, it could have been done in other months, but it has been specified for the month of Ramadan because it is in this month that the Quran was revealed, and when we fast, we are actually expressing our gratitude to God in this matter. So now, as you can see, that these verses that have been repeated, they tell us that initially you could, if you're sick or you are on a journey, you could just feed a needy person and that would be okay, or you could have fasted in later parts of the year. So this permission for fasting in later parts, for feeding a needy person in place of not fasting if you were sick or traveling, was withdrawn later on once the Arabs and the believers, they were used to the ritual of fasting. And it was said that now, so that you are not deprived of the blessings of Ramadan, so litukbilul iddata, so that the count is complete, it is better that you complete the count, if not in the month of Ramadan, then in later, because this is something which is going to be for your own benefit. It's going to purify your soul. And then it says, وَلِتُكَبِّرُ اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ, so that you are able to glorify God. Of course, when we are able to fast, we are glorifying God in all His grandeur, in all His splendor, because we are fasting for the sake of the fact that yes, He has told us something and we are obeying Him at the behest of the Almighty Himself, and it's as such a true expression of gratitude. So this brings us to an end to this section of verses, which have ended on verse 85. So next time we'll start off with the remaining verses. But if you have any questions, you can raise them now. Otherwise, I'm going to start the literal and idiomatic translation of the section of verses that we just studied in the last week and this week, which is verse 163 to verse 185. So kindly raise your questions if you have. Otherwise, we'll begin with these translation.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Shaban Ansari, please go ahead.
डॉक्टर साहब फिदिया जो है जैसे वो खत्म कर दिया, जैसे आपने बताया कि अल्लाह ताला ने कहा कि रखें, बाद में कहा कि रोजे रखें, लेकिन जैसे सफर पे से अगर सफर के बाद रख सकते हैं या कोई ऐसी बीमारी है जिससे ठीक हो गए तो रख सकते हैं, लेकिन कोई खुदा ना खास्ता कोई सीवियर डिजीज हो गई ऐसी कि जिससे ठीक होने का चांस कम है या ठीक होने के बाद भी मतलब सेट होने में बहुत अरसा लगता है, तो उस पे फिर फिदिया दिया जा सकता है? उसके बारे में क्या है?
That's what I said, that if your illness is terminal, or if your doctor advises you that you can never be in a position to fast, then yes, that fidya is going to continue every time that you're not able to fast. So you'll not be able to, you're not required to make up that fast in other parts of the year, because now a medical opinion has come in favor of the fact that your body cannot tolerate fasting. So now that fidya will become a permanent feature. So let's start off. وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ الرَّحْمَنُ الرَّحِيمُ. Wa and ilahukum, your God. So remember, I have been pointing this out, that the kum is a pronoun for plural, which means it addresses people who are in the plural. So ilahukum would mean you people. So, or the God of you people, or the Lord of your people. Ilahukum ilahum wahid. The Lord of your people is one. Your God is one. La ilaha illahu ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So this is like a repetition of the previous, and in another sense it says La, not, ilaha, God, illa, except, who, He. So there is no God except He. And who is He? Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So Ar-Rahman is who is abounding in mercy, and Ar-Rahim, that His mercy is everlasting. So the word Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, they have to be understood slightly, that both of them, they come from the root word Rahima. But the word Rahman has this exaggeration in it. It means that the Almighty is exploding with mercy, something He's phenomenally overwhelmed with. And Rahim means that when some person is exploding with mercy, you tend to think that it will just die down because it's like an explosion. But the Quran has cautioned us here that no, if His mercy is exploding, it's something which is there in leaps, in bounds and measures, then it is eternal. It's not going to die away. Something which is, given to us in such a profound way, you do have this danger in your mind that it will just die out. No, the Quran says He's compassionate, He's abounding in compassion, and don't forget that this effervescence is going to cease one day. No, this is eternal. So His immense passion is there, and that immense compassion is going to be there for the rest of your life. So it's like an eternal compassion. So inna fi khalqis samawati wal ardi wa ikhtilafil layli wan nahar. Inna, indeed, fi, in, khalq, creation, as-samawat, this is the plural of sama, and it means the sky. So indeed in the creation of the skies, and this is presented as the plural because we know that the Quran says that there are 7 skies, or there are 7 heavens. So that is why it is expressed in the plural. Wa, and, al-ard, the earth, wa, and, ikhtilaf, coming and going, it's like the alternation, al-layl, the night, an-nahar, the day. And I do hope and sincerely hope that you get the opportunity of writing down this vocabulary, because you see my purpose of this literal translation is that if you keep writing this vocabulary, because 60 to 70% of this vocabulary is going to be repeated every now and then. So by that repetition, if you keep on writing and keep on repeating that repetition in writing, slowly these words and their translations will get stuck up in your mind, which is the purpose. So please do make this effort, all of you who can, that during this literal translation, you must write down the words and their meanings, because this is something which is going to really be helpful for you when you study the Quran later on, and you'll find that those words that you wrote down are coming back to you in your mind, and you're going to connect. And without learning Arabic, inshallah, you'll be able to understand the Quran, or better part of the Quran. So this is the reason that this exercise is being done every time that we finish a section of verses. Okay, wal fulk. Fulk is the ship. Wa is an, al fulk is the ship. Allati, which, tajri, which sails, fi, in, al bahar, the sea, bima, with, yanfa'u, benefit, annas, people. So literally, we have just translated it, and idiomatically it would mean that indeed in the creation of the heavens, and the earth, and in the coming and going of the night and the day, ikhtilaf. And this also brings me to another important area of Arabic understanding, and that is, do note this down, that because most of you are conversant in the Urdu language also, that there are a lot of words which are common in the Urdu and Arabic language, but there is a note of caution here, and that is that on many occasions the word might be the same, but the meaning is different. And the word ikhtilaf that you see right here is a beautiful example here. So the word ikhtilaf in Arabic, the way it is used here, means alternation, coming and going of the day and night. But in the Urdu language, we know that the ikhtilaf means difference of opinion. The word is the same, the meaning is different. So just as you have to be cautious that at times the words have the same meaning when they travel from one language to another, it is also the entire opposite, that they totally change meanings. So ikhtilaf is a very prominent example. Wal fulkil lati tajri fil bahar, and the ship when it sails through the sea, bima yanfa'un nas, with that which is beneficial for mankind, for human beings. Of course, referring to merchandise which travels in those ships. Wa, and ma, that anzala, sends down, Allah, God, and that which God sends down, minas sama, from the sky, minma, from among water, fa ahya bihi, and fa, therefore, ahya, gives life, bihi, through it. Through which? Through water. So you see, water was mentioned earlier on. So it says, and from the water which God sends down from the sky, and through it revives the earth. Ahya bil earth, gives life to the earth. And why is it said like this? It is said like this because the earth became dead in certain parts of the season when there is no rain. So the earth becomes dead, it becomes desolate. So the word used is for ahya bihil arda. Through this water, God revived the land. God once again brought it to life. And the words are ba'da mautiha, after the earth had died. So maut is death, ha is it. This pronoun is referring, the antecedent of the pronoun ha is the earth. So the Almighty through this water revived the earth ba'da mautiha, after it had died. So the sentence is still continuing, which means wa, and batha, spread, fiha, in it, min kulli, everything, dabba, living, wa, and tasrif means coming and going, again something similar to ikhtilaf, which means the manifestations or the various forms that manifest themselves of what? A riyah is the plural of rih, which means the wind. Wa, and as-sahab, the clouds, al-musakhar, which are subservient, baina, between, as-sama, the sky, wa, and al-ard, the earth. And now we find the answer to all these clauses. La ayatil liqawmin yaqilun. La ayat, ayah is the plural of ayah. So it means signs. Liqawmin, for people. Le is for, qawm is people. Yaqilun, who think, who use their intellect. So what the verse is saying is that in the creation of the heavens and the earth, in the alternation of the day and night, in the ship which sails through the sea with merchandise, with what is beneficial to people, and the water which is sent down by the Almighty, and through that water the Almighty revives the earth after it had died, and the scattering in it of every living being, and the manifestations of the wind and the clouds which are subservient, which have been made subservient between the heavens and the earth. What is it? La ayatil liqawmin yaqilun. There are signs for men who understand. So basically, this is a longish verse in which the pairs are first mentioned, like for example, samawat wal ard, layl wal nahar, and then some other examples are given, like the ship, and then the water from the heavens, and then revival of the dead earth. And then of course, once again it is said that these living beings which are scattered in this earth, all forms of living beings are scattered, and how these winds, they blow at some instances they cause storms and destruction, and other instances they are a means of real life, because after desolation and the earth being dead, it is once again revived. And these clouds which are subservient between the heavens and the earth, which means that they are subservient to the directive of God. All these phenomena, la ayatil liqawmin yaqilun, they are signs for those who reflect. And ayat, as you know, is the plural of ayah, and it means a sign. And so what the Quran is saying, that what we have already understood earlier, that all these are signs for those who would like to use their intellect. And what exactly is that? That this whole earth and this whole world and this whole universe is not a meaningless creation. Things are in superb coordination. The day and night, they work as supplement to one another and complement one another. The heavens and the earth, they complement one another. The the ship which should have fallen down, or should have, there was no reason for it to float. It should have drowned in the sea, but somehow the Almighty had made it sail through the sea with merchandise and the water which is coming down and benefiting and making the earth benefit from its use. They show that this world is being tended by someone. They show that this world has a meaningful purpose. It has an end to it. There are certain things that are attached to it. So this is the sense which the verse conveys ultimately, and you would note that this reasoning is repeated in the Quran in various surahs a lot of times. And then it says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. Wa, and, min, from, annas, people, man, who, yattakhidhu, hold, min dunillahi, other than God, andada. Andada is the plural of niddun. So niddun means associate or partner or equal. So there are those among people who hold partners except God, who associate partners with God. And then what does it say? Yuhibbunahum kahubbillah. Yuhibbunahum means they love them. They love them kahubbillah, the way they should love God. Ka is like, hub is love, Allah is God. So they love those partners. So there are people who associate partners with God, and they love those partners the way they should love God. So they have divided their love. It's not just God that they love those partners. The Quran says how strange it is that they are loving those partners which have no basis. And the thing is that they should have loved God only, but they ended up loving God and with Him loving His partners as well. And then it says, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. وَالَّذِينَ, wa, and, allazina, they, amanu, professed faith, ashaddu, the strongest, hubban lillah, in loving God. So idiomatically it would mean, and those who have believed, they love God the most. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. It's a beautiful verse. It's like it creates that inspiration. It creates that stir in our souls, that human beings, as people who have been created by the Almighty, they are so wretched at times that they end up loving God and loving the partners of God as they should have loved God. But the fact is, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ, that as far as the believers are concerned, they love God the most. There is no one who they love more than God. There is no one who equals God in their love. Wa, and, law, if, yara, they see, allazina, they, zalamu, who wrong their souls. Zalamu, of course, especially when it's used in this sense, it refers to shirk or to polytheism, which, because you see, worshipping one God is the greatest right of one's soul. But when you do not do so and you start worshipping other gods, then the Quran says that this is like depriving your own soul of justice. So it's like zalamu anfusahum, which means that you are being unjust to your own self. Is yarawna al-azaba, is when yarawna, they see al-azab. So it seems, and if these unjust people see the time when they will face azab, when they will see azab, is yarawna al-azab. Now you'll see that the answer to this conditional sentence is suppressed. And this is a very common feature of Quranic Arabic. So at times the stress which is to be laid on that condition and the answer to that condition is so apparent that it does not need to be expressed in words. So when it is said that would that they had seen when they would face the afflictive torment, what will happen? That these people who have wronged their souls, would they see what they will face at that time when they will face azab? Now the answer to this is not given, but Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi has revealed the answer, and that is, it will become evident to them. So the sentence, of course, doesn't complete itself when you leave it as it is. And if these unjust people see the time when they will face torment, of course, this is an incomplete sentence. And the sense is that if these unjust people see the time when they face the torment, it will become evident to them. So the fact is that instead of asking for this punishment and then getting it and then realizing, they will then realize that, well, they had asked for that punishment, and now that they are facing that punishment, only now they realize that they are in the grasp of that punishment. So, وَلَوْ يَرَى الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا إِذْ يَرَوْنَ الْعَذَابَ is such an emphatic sentence that the answer or the remaining part of the sentence is suppressed, just to express the extent of wrath of the Almighty, that had these disbelievers, had these people who are unjust, they are seen when they face the torment, only then they'll realize that what they are facing is something that they just cannot bear. And then it says, أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا. It will become evident to them that all might and power rests with God alone. So this is another aspect that we have to understand, that earlier on I had said that the answer to the conditional sentence is suppressed. So this is something which is actually negating it. So I would also say that another sense in which this translation can be expressed is that you accept the part أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا as the answer to the conditional sentence, and I think that is more correct, and I will rectify my previous translation. So therefore, the answer to walau would be أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ. So had these people seen, who had wronged their souls, had they seen the azab, what will happen? The thing that will happen would be أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا. They will realize that all the power rests with God. Anna, that, al-quwwa, power, lillahi, for God, jamia, all. So what is being in fact said here is that when these people will see the torment on that day of judgment, only then they will realize that all power rests with God. So yes, in this world they were told that the Almighty is going to seize them and punish them. But on that day when they will face God, then they will realize that really what the claim was being made, that the claim that was being made in the previous world, that God has all the power and which they were not paying heed to, is now being brought before them, and they are being told that, remember, this has now become a reality, and that reality is that all power will rest with God. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعَذَابِ. Wa, and anna, that, Allah, God, shadid is severe, al-azab, torment. Wa, so the idiomatic translation would be, and indeed God is severe in his punishment. So that is another sentence which is just a comment on the previous one. So please do note that I have rectified my previous translation, and I do concede that instead of regarding the answer of love to be suppressed, it is not suppressed. It is actually أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا, and the portion which has been revealed by Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi, when he says that it will become evident to them, this is just part of the suppression. It's not the complete answer, which is actually found in the words أَنَّ الْقُوَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Okay, next one. إِذْ تَبَرَّأَ الَّذِي نَتَّبِعُوا مِنَ الَّذِي نَتَّبَعُوا وَرَآوُا الْعَذَابَ وَتَقَطَّعَتْ بِهِمُ الْأَسْبَابِ. Is, remember, or at that time, tabarra'a. Tabarra'a means to forsake, to disown. Allazina, those. Uttubi'u means who were followed. Min allazina, from those. Attabahu, who followed. So those who were followed will be disowned by the followers. Wa, and ra'au, this they will see. Al-azab, the torment. Wa, and taqatta'at will mean they would sever, they would be break. Bihim, with them. Al-asbab, all means, all sources, or all ties. So idiomatically it would mean, and remember the time when those who were followed will disown or will forsake. Tabarra. And who they will be forsaken by? Those who followed them. So the people who were followed will be forsaken by their followers. The people who would be followed would be forsaken by their followers. Wara'aul azab, and will face azab. Wara'aul azab, they will face azab, they will face punishment. Wa, and taqatta'at, break. Al-asbab, bihimul asbab, which means that all their ties will break, which means that no one will be connected to other people. Remember, these followed people, they gave this assurance that their followers will be benefited by them. They will intercede for them. But the Quran says, and when that situation is going to arise, taqatta'at bihimul asbab, the ties between them will be broken. There will be no connection, and the yearning of being interceded for them would never be fulfilled. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا wa and qala said, الَّذِينَ those who اتَّبَعُوا followed, low if anna that lana for us karratan another chance, فَنَتَبَرَّأَ we would disown minhum them, kama as they tabarra'u disowned minna us. So idiomatically it would mean that those who followed, they would say that if we are given another chance, law anna lana karratan, if we are given another chance, فَنَتَبَرَّأَ مِنْهُمْ كَمَا تَبَرَّأُوا مِنَّا we will disown them the way they are now disowning us. فَنَتَبَرَّأُ we will disown them, minhum them, kama the way, tabarra'u minna they are disowning us. They have disowned us now. So you see, this is like a yearning that they have expressed, that now on the day of judgment, the followed ones have disowned the followers. The followers say that if we are given another chance and we are sent to the previous world, we will disown them the way they have now disowned us on the day of judgment. But the Quran says, كَذَلِكَ يُرِيهِمُ اللَّهُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ حَسَرَاتٍ عَلَيْهِمْ. كَذَلِكَ in this way, Yurihimullah is just one expression. God will show them. Yuri means show, hum means them. Him means them. So God will show them. What will He show them? A'malahum, their deeds. Hasaratin, in the form of longing, alayhim, upon them. Wa and ma, not. Hum, they. Bikharijina, come out. Minan nar, from hell, from the fire. An-nar is the fire, of course, representing hell. So, Kazalika yurihimullah would mean, in this way, God will make them show their deeds to be longing on them. I mean, it would be as if there would be regret on them. وَمَا هُمْ بِخَارِجِينَ مِنَ النَّارِ and they will never be able to get out of the fire. So basically what the Quran is saying, that this longing they are expressing, that they are followed, their leaders disown them in the next world. And now they are saying that if they are given a chance and sent to the previous world, they will disown their leaders. But the Quran says this is not going to happen. So therefore, God is going to show them their deeds in the form of longing. And they were just wishing for something to happen, and it will never happen. And as a result of this, they'll be consigned to hell. And وَمَا هُمْ بِخَارِجِينَ مِنَ النَّارِ they will never be able to get out of it. So I'm going to end here, viewers, because of the lack of time, inshallah. We'll be translating literally and idiomatically in our next session.